I think I was trying to match the energy of that first take, the first experience I ever had on film, which was like, oh my God, I've arrived. It all came out. I got raped. I got killed. I felt it. And then by the end,
you were doing shit.
I was doing shit. And then by the end, at like 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, I'm like, what the fuck is this? You know, like, this isn't that. I don't want to do this with my life. I hate this. This is horrible.
Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I am Jack Smart, the senior film writer at the AV Club. If you're interested in programming like this from the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Now, it's my pleasure to have our panel of Emmy-nominated actors. How are you all today?
Good.
Great.
Doing all right. Thanks. Thank you.
So good to have you all, and congratulations. To start, let's go around the horn and introduce ourselves with what were your first impressions of your now Emmy-nominated role versus what then surprised you about developing and playing this character? Murray, can I start with you?
Sure. I read the first script. I only had the first script of White Lotus. And I just adore Mike White, and I adored him even more when I read this script. It was so brilliant. And this character was so brilliantly written. So I just felt like, you know, super excited when I read it, and also had, like, which doesn't always happen, had some immediate thoughts about what I wanted to do with the character, which felt like a good thing. So yeah, I was super excited. Then I agreed to the role. And then on the way over to Hawaii, I read the rest of the scripts. So then I saw this like incredible roller coaster ride that this character goes on. And so I felt like ecstatic that it was me that got the chance to do that. And in almost equal parts, terrified that I was going to mess it up. So just because it's such a great role, and I was like, God, I want to. I mean, that's a good feeling to have, I think, because it made me feel like, oh wow, I want to do the best that I can on this. Not that I don't always, but it felt like an amazing role to be dropped in my lap. So yeah.
And then Jake, because this is also White Lotus, and there were several surprises with your character as well. Can I go to you?
Yeah, sure. I think I came in like a little. I felt like I had to like put something on it. You know what I mean? Like I had to like add a little like fire in it, and the reality was kind of the opposite. Was that like the Shane is at his most full as a character when it's like thrown away at times, and then is like explosive, you know. And a lot of that was just following Mike's direction and thoughts, and then trusting that he would take what he wanted in the edit, you know. And so there's like, I don't know, 1,000 versions of like this show with the breadth of performance within all these scenes, kind of led by Mike. But that like the real like fulfillment or joy in doing this was finding these ways to like toss it off. Things that maybe I felt like really needed to be underlined are actually the clearest when you know, let stand on their own, you know, without me being like, oh, we should crank it up on this thing. We should do like a hat on a hat with that. Being like, no. It's way better to like let it ride, that the writing is so strong that you can just like let that writing be on its own. And then the surprising, you know, was Mike's was in the writing, and then also this like, I hope, ability to like build underneath this seemingly like ridiculous dick, like real needs and like desperation and want and like pain that then like only sometimes like is acknowledged or kind of bubbles up, but that within this very like kind of snotty kid is like a real need for someone to be like, you're okay. It's going to be okay. Yeah, that's my rambling thoughts.
Steve, hi. I'm asking, what was your first impressions of of this Emmy-nominated role versus what then surprised you in the filming?
The final product of what I read was, I was blown away. And the script was great. I mean, I read the pilot. I hadn't read any other episodes. And that alone to me was I thought, amazing. And what Mike and those guys did was truly incredible. When seeing it, I mean, when I watched it, I really felt like I wasn't in it. Like I watched it, like it was the first time. But Mike is it read to me like a theater piece in a way. It was these long scenes with two characters talking and these not panicking at all. And I don't know.
That's super interesting to hear. Yeah, because I feel like that must be the kind of show that is very different in the viewing of it versus the doing of it.
Yeah, totally.
And Seth, for you, for Pam and Tommy, how much did you know about this character, this real life person?
I knew a lot. My production company originally developed the project and brought on, the writers and showrunners and producers and directors. So I think I predated most of the elements of the project. So it was actually really interesting, and I find a lot in my life, I kind of compartmentalize my various jobs to various levels of effect. But this was, I think, a very good exercise in developing the script and the story for many years, really trying to serve this overall kind of narrative and kind of reframing of this kind of cultural event that I myself had kind of had giant misconceptions of what had actually happened. And then, that whole time I knew I was going to play Rand, and I kind of had one version of it in my head. I viewed him as this very kind of thoughtful, angry kind of person who's very, intellectualized, in his actions and beliefs, even though he's wrong. And then literally the first take, the director was like, I think the guy's not thinking as much as you think he's thinking. And I was like, oh, and I was like, okay, maybe the whole take on the character is that he truly is not considering any of his actions. And he's kind of like an empty void that, is very simple and singular in his thoughts. And he was like, let's try that. And then I did that. And then I watched playback and I thought, that's better. Let's do that. So it was interesting. Luckily I'm open to taking big swings, and I'm happy to not have like a really preconceived notion with how I'm going to do these things. And Craig Gillespie, the director, someone I really respected and trusted a lot. So it was a drastic shift, I would say, that all happened within the first 45 minutes of being on set for the first day.
Wow. That is so interesting. That is real actor flexibility that you have to roll with the punches.
That's a very generous way of putting it.
Peter, what about you? What were your first impressions versus then surprises?
So this, the whole issue that the show is about is one that had been very personal for me for a long time. So I have had two very close people in my life who've had problems with this drug. And I guess it was 2016. Norman Lear was doing this thing for Epics. It was like issues that people should consider for the election. And I chose the opioid crisis because of my connection to it. And I went to Dayton, Ohio, and I did like ride-alongs with cops. I met with dealers, users, families, everything. And not many people saw that, but it was interesting for me. So then Danny, who I really respect and admire, said he was doing this project. And immediately when I heard about it, I know Warren Littlefield, and I heard he was doing it with Danny. And so I called Warren and I said, how do I get to be in this thing? And I said, like, I want to take down these motherfuckers. I'm furious. And so they gave me the role of the guy who's taking down the motherfuckers. And it felt really good every day, you know, like I felt it's rare that I play a lot of people that are on the other side of things like this. And I just had such still do, I'm not satisfied yet, need for justice for over 500,000 deaths that were not necessary. So for me, it was really about the issue. But then when I got the script, it was such a pleasure to, you know, and in many ways, my character is like getting the audience information. You know, there's lots of stuff to get through in terms of what they did. And I think the only way that I could have done it is that I had a connection to the issue, because otherwise I'm just going like, did you know they did this? You know, and they did that, and everybody'd be bored stiff. I really every day showed up going like, let's crush them, you know, like that guy right there.
That's certainly the next. Yes, Mr. Stuhlbarg, speaking of what Peter said about the other side of things, it seems like you were playing a character on the other side of things. What did you know? What were your first impressions?
I knew nothing. The opposite of Peter. And didn't know why they were had thought of me for this part. Frankly, because I knew nothing about it. The more I researched, the more I learned that the story was going to span from 1985 to the present. So it made more sort of sense that there was going to be a large arc there. And yeah, the more I dug, the more I learned. The more I learned, the more I questioned. I tried not to judge who the guy was, because it's easy to point fingers about these things. And the more I learned about him as an individual and who his family was, and the specters he had around him, the shadows he was in, it gave me a lot more understanding of who he might have been. The more I read and the more I learned. And that was, I think, the surprise for me, was to learn a bit about his family and to learn about the factors in his life that led to him making the decisions that he did.
All of you, I would say all of you, with the exception of Peter, are playing characters that are not great people. And speaking of what Michael said about judging your characters, I mean, Michael, I do want to start with you. Like, how do you as an actor approach a character who doesn't have the same morality as you do? Is it about finding common ground or the overlap between you and especially a character that whose values you don't agree with?
Step by step, I guess. If you're lucky, you have someone like Danny Strong writing for you, and he kind of lays out the path for you. So in one sense, you're just following the path that you're given. And I didn't know the whole trajectory of the story. I just started with, the first couple of episodes and kept moving forward from there and tried to glean as much as I could about him and try to understand the circumstances. And, inevitably, each of us have to approach these projects with who we are, and we make choices along the way. And sometimes we find an immediate connection to something, and sometimes we don't. And if you're lucky, you find your path. I mean, it's different every time. That's part of the fun of what we get to do, is that you never know what it's going to be, and every challenge is exactly that. It's a challenge. So if someone doesn't believe the same things, maybe you try to ask as many questions as you can about why are they making the decisions that they're making? What are their blind spots? Why aren't they looking at something? In this case, why is he blaming the abusers, as opposed to taking some responsibility? What is his overall goal about what it is he's trying to do? Is it simply about making his mark in the world and trying to overshadow his uncle, who made a huge impression in his life? Or And there's all these questions that are asked, and sometimes you can answer them and sometimes you can't. You just sort of throw yourself into it. And if you're lucky, you have amazing collaborators who can shape what you're doing and sort of say, that's right. No, let's stay away from that. Do that again. That kind of thing, really. And they piece it together how they want it to be.
Does that resonate with any of you, especially the White Lotus cast members? Is there an element of like indulging in your worst vices, or I don't know, leaning into the parts of yourself that you don't personally like?
Well, I just want to say that answer is remarkable. I just think that's like all of it. You know what I mean? Like that's it. That's the whole deal. It's like, you know, it's like I just would be like, it's just plug and play like my character name or the project to what Michael has just said. Like that's just it. Is like these kind of step-by-step things. And for me, I guess yeah, you know, like to answer your first question and then that sort of addendum is like, yeah, I'm a motherfucker when it comes to like, I have to consciously, like, if I call customer service, be like, hey, this person's not the person that's screwing you over, you know, like be cool with them, because you know, it's like, I just want to come in hot and be like, here's how I was done wrong. Don't you get it? And for me, for this character, like that's all he's doing is going like, don't you see what a victim I am? Don't you see how the world is against me here? And you know, like I feel like any one of us who worked on the White Lotus keeps coming back to Mike, because it does like start and end with him, where like he's written, at least I'll speak for myself, like these characters and then put them into the exact circumstances that like just turn those screws, you know, where like for me, the thing to hang my hat on was like, this character has actually been done wrong. Like he paid for a thing and he didn't get it. You know, like that's fair to go like, dude, I paid you money and now I'm getting 70% of what I paid 100% for. What is this? And at the same time, is totally honest about like who he is and what he wants. There's like no duplicitous nature in him. He's going like, my wife's hot and I want to have sex with my wife and I'm going to tell her she's hot. Is there a problem with that? Like, and in a way there's not, and in a lot of ways there is, you know, it's like, but he's not lying. He's not cheating. He's not cutting corners. And so there's a lot of things to like lean into in moments where I maybe otherwise would lean towards a judgment of this behavior or something, to go like, yeah, but here's all the things you can lean into. They're totally true and real. And, that you can just kind of, I could like hold on to free of judgment, you know, and kind of like reroute through that. And then again, just echoing what Michael said, it's like to then have someone who's taking that apart and piecing it back together and molding it into something. And then people see that and go, you are so good. And you're like, well, thanks. But there's this whole other thing happening between me on set and then you seeing it, you know, and like that like makes or breaks the whole deal sometimes. So yeah.
Can I say, Jack, like there was some glee for me in doing the scenes with Jake, in being able to kind of vent my decades of pent up frustration at all the bullies or obnoxious people like Shane that had come across my path, that I, you know, being a people pleaser, hadn't kind of let my feelings out at them. So there was some glee in being able to like just, you know, manipulate and try and sort of bring him down in certain ways or make his life miserable. But I also, it wasn't, but I never saw that, I guess, as, I don't know, I felt like a really deep kind of affinity with the character and where he was at. And I feel like that character kind of does, maybe this is something I shouldn't say, but does exist inside of me in terms of feeling, I mean, and some of the things he does are horrible, the way he treats the you know, some of the people who are working under him. But that frustration of being in a situation or a system, a social system that is unjust and unfair, and just and also because we were shooting the show sort of towards the beginnings of the pandemic, and you know, being in a period in time where we're in like an environmental emergency with huge social issues that are, you know, that need to be addressed, and a political sort of, you know, political challenges. And, you know, it's not hard to feel overwhelmed by the world that we're living in at this point. And so Armand, as we went on, came to sort of represent this part of me, and I think a lot of us collectively, that's like, I can't take this anymore. This is insane, you know. So I felt, even though there was glee in sort of leaning into the stuff, particularly with Jake's character Shane, there was also like some sort of catharsis of like, oh my God, this is just out of control and insane. This existence that we're perpetuating and trying to exist like nothing's going on in. But again, as Michael and Jake said, you know, we had Mike White as the maestro, who's, you know, we're trying all these different levels all along the way, which was so fun, and this like great sort of atmosphere of play that Mike creates. And then at the end, when we're done, he picks all the bits and puts the jigsaw puzzle together. And so, you know, like Jake said, in some ways, you're like, when people say, oh, wow, that, you know, what you did was great, or, you know, what people respond to it or whatever, you're like, I mean, thank you, but also like, thank Mike, because Mike is the one that's, you know, putting all that stuff together, and that, you know, incredible team of people that we had. So it was, you know, joyful to be part of that team, I guess, is the long and the short of it.
Well, and I feel like the flip side of not judging your characters, this idea of the relationship that you as an actor have with your character, it touches on what Seth said about, I feel like 9 times out of 10, it's the actor's job to think, use your brain, be mental, but your character maybe not so much. I'm so fascinated by this thing of like, let's switch your character to less thoughtful. Seth, you used the term anti-void. How do you all, maybe when you're on set, how do you get into that zone? If you find yourself in the middle of a take overthinking, how do you get out of it?
I mean, for me, it's pretty practical. Like, I've unfortunately noticed no correlation between how much I like feel like I'm giving a good performance in the moment and how good that performance actually is after the fact. I have to edit a lot of my own films and things like that, so I'm confronted with that reality on like a startling basis, you know. And so, for me, it's pretty practical. You know, there's certain things that me and the director again have talked. I talk a lot to the director often about the overall energy and tone and style and message of the piece and the character and what we need from the character, and it would get as granular as like, oh, like that was a little too likable, you know, you're a little too endearing in that. When you do that, it is reminiscent of things you do that makes you an endearing performer. Let's not do that. And that, to me, was like a very good way to like put it in practice. Like, I also find a lot of people have like very hypothetical kind of semantical conversations, and then when it's actually put into practice, you maybe then realize you were having two very different conversations. And so I'm very happy to just try things and just say like, okay, let's just try it, and then we'll look at it and we'll see if that was what you were talking about, and if it wasn't, we now have like something that we have a thing we can base it on, more or less, you know. And so, yeah, like and that was really what was nice about the partnership I had with Craig and the other directors of the show, especially. We're like, we could just try it. And we would talk about something, we'd try it, we'd go back and we watch it and be like, you know, that was too weird. That's like, that does not seem like someone you want to watch, you know? And that was like, and then every once in a while we'd be like, oh, that was like a good threading of the needle of being, you know, not someone you like, but someone you understand, and not someone you necessarily relate to deeply, but someone you sort of empathize with. And we would be very specific that was what we were trying to do. And also going in knowing that, like, in general, if anything, I've seen how much terrible behavior I can get away with on screen and have audiences like and forgive me for it. And that's like something I don't take lightly. You know, I really understand that. And I've really seen that in practice. So it was a very conscious effort to make sure that we weren't creating a character, honestly, that was too likable. and anytime it seemed like I was falling back on the things that I'm used to doing that make me a likable performer, I was told to stop, and I would try to catch it myself and not do it, you know? Yeah.
I mean, that touches on a bigger career thing of like, how much do you guys think about to the extent that you can decide the next role that you take on, do you want to challenge audience expectations? Because Peter, you touched on this of like, I've not played a character on this side of the spectrum versus this one. Is there a conscious effort of trying to subvert?
No.
No.
I just take the best thing that's in front of me. I mean, it never feels like it's difficult to choose what you do next, because it's not like you're choosing from a grocery store full of items. You know what I mean? So, you know, like I'm hungry and I walk into a grocery store. That's hard. What the decisions I have to make are like this one that pays a lot but sucks, or this one that shoots in 3 weeks and it's kind of enjoyable. I look for just working with talented people, and luckily people see me in different ways, you know? It's funny, I just did this project with the director, Michel Franco, and a wonderful Jewish Mexican director. And he had written my part. The name of my character was Saul, and the name of the brother was Isaac. And I said, are you aware that these character names sound like they're Jewish? And he goes, well, you're Jewish. And I was like, no, I'm not Jewish, but that's cool that you think I'm Jewish. If you think I'm Jewish, then maybe other people will think I'm Jewish, because there's no acting Jewish. You know, like you don't like.
For the record, no one's ever said that's cool if you think I'm Jewish before this thing. That's never happened before. The first time that's been said.
So like, I'm always sort of fascinated with like the way that people see me. And if someone's seeing me in a different way, that has my attention for sure. But like in the end, I'm like, what else have they done? If they haven't done anything, that's kind of cool too, because then who knows? That's exciting. But like, you know, you want to work with the people that are like Danny, that have done things that have done well, and there's clear examples that they have talent. But this is not like a difficult decision to make. You know, like the things that you actually want to do, they come along every so often. It's probably not as often as you want them to come along. And it's really obvious when it's one that you should do. I mean, for me, I don't rack my brains over like, should I do this or that? Or I played a good guy and I'm gonna play a bad guy. I'm just sort of like, cool, this person likes me. You know, that's like all it is.
Speaking of what Murray said about people pleasing, like actors are people pleasers, right?
Yeah.
Well, before you get hired.
Yeah.
Well, and you've transitioned us nicely to, I got to ask, like the evergreen advice questions. We're all about advice at the SAG Foundation. First of all, I love asking, what do each of you remember about your very first day on a set, on any film set? And what do you wish you'd known?
I was, you know what? It was weird because I was acting, luckily I was with a friend of mine, Ethan Hawke, and we were doing Reality Bites. And we had done a bunch of theater before, and in New York, and so we were friends. And so that was the one thing that I felt good about. But I remember being absolutely petrified because I was confident in being an actor, and we had already gone through a rehearsal process that I thought was bullshit, where they like tape the floor and they tape the door as if like, well, I'm not going to walk through the wall on the day. Like, why are we doing this? I don't know. Why are we wasting time? And we would sit around and we would talk. We would talk about the scene. We would talk about what we did, but we never did it. We never rehearsed. We never actually read it. You know what I mean? Because everybody's petrified to just suck in front of each other. We're all like insecure, right? And so, but the best thing to do is to rehearse so you get that over with, so you can just suck in front of people. So we didn't do that. So I get on set and I didn't know what a mark was. I didn't know not to talk when I was off camera. And the good thing is I asked. I was an idiot. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, man. What do you mean? Like, okay. Oh, right. And so,
That's great advice. Yeah.
I was, welcomed into the fold because they were like, oh, he's an idiot. It's awesome.
Because everyone's new at some point, right? Everyone has their first time doing this.
Yeah. You got to figure it out on your own, usually.
Did anybody else have like an opposite experience, not asking questions, wishing they did?
I did. Yeah. I did. My first movie was Dead Man Walking. My first day on set, Sean Penn dragged me and Missy Yeager through a swamp. One long take, right? Throws us down in the mud, rapes both of us. This is a oneer.
Oh, God.
And then kills us. And it felt really real to me. I was totally overwhelmed, shaken, but it was kind of nice, right? Like, because the tears flowed because I was so nervous that all the energy was, I was like, holy shit, I think I did it. Like Sean sure did it, but I think I did it because he was doing it, because there's no avoiding him. But then they sent me to the shower because I had mud all over me. So I looked like I would look at the beginning of the scene, and they put me in a second set of clothes and they did the hair and makeup again. I was like, we're doing it again. Okay. And that first energy lasted for like maybe 4 takes, but we did this process all night long, different angles. And I didn't understand that. I think I was trying to match the energy of that first take, the first experience I ever had on film, which was like, oh my God, I've arrived. It all came out. I got raped. I got killed. I felt it. And then by the end,
you were doing shit.
I was doing shit. And then by the end, at like 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, what the fuck is this? This isn't that. I don't want to do this with my life. I hate this. This is horrible. Thing is, I would say that's the one that might have wound up in the film, because it's something sweet about seeing some people that don't quite know what's going to happen to them yet, right? Like, I was so ramped up for the scene. There's something kind of better about just like watching these 2 kids walking through the woods, asking questions, going like, what's going on? Where are we going?
That's
so yeah,
incredible.
day one.
That's an incredible day one. Yeah. Does anybody else have a story like that?
No.
We should have let Peter go last. Where does theater, because Steve, you mentioned theater, and of course a lot of you come from the theater background. If you have that as your background and you're doing the set for the first time, in addition to not knowing a mark, does theater help or hurt? Like, how does that factor into your first day?
No, I think it's everything. I'm for me, because I come from there, but I don't think that's the only route. But for me, it's the same. When people go, it's so different, right? I go, no, it's the same. No, I just don't think it's much different, other than the obvious. Yes, I'm on stage and I have to project, and in theater, you live in the moment, and there's something beautiful, and there is many things that are different. But as an actor, I think for me, it's the same approach, and it's the same work, and it's the same homework. I over-prepare out of fear, but also so that when I get to the set, and I realize, because I've worked on, early on, I learned this, that we don't have a lot of time. We're not going to rehearse. I have to listen to other people. I might have a totally different opinion as to how this scene, the tone of it and everything, but like, Peter might have a completely different idea. And if I'm not open to that, if I'm not over prepared, then I'm not going to be able to listen to him, really listen. And it's really that simple, and it's the same thing on stage. I don't care if you're in a 5-month run, man, it's the same thing.
My first real, I did one line on the guiding light, 2 times, and had to pay more money than I was making to get into the union to be eligible to do it a second time, and the line was like, no. And they cut, they handed me a folder and said did you file the papers? And I was like, nope. And then that was me. I was like, crushing it. And then my first real job was a multicam, and I'd gone to theater school and drama school and had done a couple of small plays in New York. And that the multicam was the perfect transition for me from live audience to somewhere in the middle of jokes that have a very specific rhythm to them, of somewhere in the midst of learning how to perform for an audience and how to perform for a camera, kind of transitioning from one to the other. And then in the midst of that, really wanting to be kind of being a snotty kid and just being I don't want to do multicam. I want to do single cam comedy. This is bullshit, And then getting a couple of those pilots and getting replaced in them because I wasn't good in them, because it was I didn't understand the nuance, how multicam is so much the rhythm, is so entirely the rhythm. And then to get to single cam is so internally driven, just true acting, but the setup is just funny inherently, you know what I mean? But it doesn't require this kind of thing that you can recognize in the multi, that the joke can be bad and the audience knows where the laugh is supposed to come. And so then that took some years of recalibrating to go how do I shift out of this thing into what I engage with as a viewer, but can't seem to execute as a performer in the way that I want to. And that took a long time. And then feeling finally I started to understand what that really was and how to get closer into that and keep trying to chip away at the kind of shitty gimmicks, or safety nets, maybe not even gimmicks, but just a safety net, being well, this makes me feel it's okay, and being well, stop doing that. That's so self-involved. Stop, try to get over here to this more clean, grounded, honest, connected thing. And it's such a ramble, but that's just been my experiences, going from, that's
No, absolutely. And what you just said connected to what Seth said about it's in the doing of the thing that you figure this stuff out. It's not really in the discussing or the prep beforehand. It's in the practice. It's in the actual day on set.
Yeah, or the feeling of being on set and going I don't not want, for the other person's, if it's my coverage and I'm partway into a thing and it's not going well, I used to be more inclined to want to pause and reset and keep going, for fear that then somebody's got bad footage, and for fear that that winds up in the cut, and going I don't want you to have that. I would rather take a moment and reset into the thing I know and go again, so that I feel whatever you've got in the end is something I want used. And some of that's a lack of trust in a director. So then you work with somebody that you really trust, and you're I'll give you whatever you want and trust that your eye's better than mine. And or then get, if you're lucky enough to be able to be in a place where you can say, can I go again? Could we do one more? In order to have the shot to do it. Because early on, they're you get a take. You know what I mean? You're you can't be I go again. And they're dude, we're going to lunch. We're out, man. That was great. It's fine. It's good. It's good. So yeah. Yes.
And Marie?
Oh, I was just going to tag on to what Steve was saying, in terms of, because I started working in plays in theater. I mean, not with the Royal Shakespeare Company, but doing community theater. And I went to a high school that had, we did plays. It had a theater program. And so I did a lot of plays and I loved it. And we rehearsed, like hopefully you rehearse for a number of weeks. So I, in my first jobs, was terrified coming to set, and I don't think I ever was able to subdue that terror in my first few jobs, but it did. And then when I got to set, I realized, as Steve was saying, like there often isn't rehearsal, like you just sort of go into it. So because I been working in plays and you rehearsed, I would just come over prepared. And in some ways, perhaps it's unnecessary. For me, I like it. I also enjoy the preparation, I guess. But there's something about, and I think this is what Steve was saying, it's certainly the way that I experience it, of coming over prepared, almost so you can throw it all away, but having like all this like sort of foundational stuff that's there if you want it, but it allows me to feel like, oh, well, I've sort of done the rehearsal process, so I feel like kind of in it in a certain way, but then I can just listen, hopefully, just like listen, I feel like it's just that for me, the job is talking and listening, and sometimes it's easy to forget that because it gets lost in all this other stuff. And if I can just be in there really listening to that other person, my best performance, I think, comes from them, from listening to them. So, that's sort of basic acting 101, I guess, but it's just, there's something that it just struck a chord with me, I guess, what Steve was saying about coming over prepared, which I definitely do, and then being willing to let it go, but just whatever you can do to just be able to be there and like listen, I think is a great thing for me anyway.
Totally. And I think going off of that, I haven't touched on auditions yet. And the way that I like to ask audition advice is for everyone's worst audition horror story, because I know that everyone has one. But it's interesting, Murray, what you're saying about like in an audition, you don't always have somebody who is listening there in the moment. But is it the same thing of you want to over prepare and then throw it all out the window?
I don't know. I feel like auditions in a way, not always, but they can be a whole different thing, because some auditions, you don't have anyone to work with. There's no reader or whatever. And you sort of have to do it all in a vacuum, which just feels so counterintuitive to me. But sometimes you have to do it. And that is acting, and it's something that you have to do sometimes. And it's just not ideal, I guess, for me, because I want to listen and I want to, it's about engagement. A lot of the time, not always, you have to do like reactive shots and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. That's when your imagination comes in really handy. You really kind of engage it as fully as you can. But I have, as I've gotten older, forced myself to find a way to enjoy auditions, because I used to be super scared and sometimes they're just not enjoyable because of the nature of that, of not being able to like be in a sort of communication with another actor. But I think that there is another joy to be found in just sort of making that other situation work. Sometimes it's more challenging though, I think. I did learn, coming back to the people pleaser thing. I'm not like a crazy people pleaser these days. I still want people to like me, I guess, but I was as a younger actor. And so I went into auditions wanting people to like me. And that's just the worst, I think. You want to be a decent person, but I was reaching, I think, earlier on in my life to try and figure out what it was they wanted and then trying to reach for that, rather than being like, well, hopefully I'm going to be the unique thing that walks into the room that they're like, oh, that's it. Not trying to go for something that they want, but just sort of fully being whatever part of me connects with whatever this role is or whatever the story is, and letting that kind of beam out, rather than trying to reach for something else that I think other people might want me to be, and that was a huge kind of thing for me to sort of get through. It was kind of a revelation for me, and it took me a while to to realize that and kind of lean into it.
I noticed when I said auditions, a lot of you just went, oof.
I'm often on the other side of auditions now, in that I'm casting a lot of films and TV shows as a producer. And even that, it's so extreme. It's like, I think I project so much onto the person doing it. It's a terrible process. It's a ridiculous, terrible process. It is generally wildly unindicative of what someone is truly capable of as a performer, to what everyone's saying. Like, intuitively, if you were to ask someone like the most simple question of like, what is acting? They'll say reacting. You're often reading against a casting director who's like, so what do you mean there's a bomb under the sea? What are you talking about? It's like, it's a terrible process. And I was never good at auditioning, which is honestly one of the reasons I started writing things for myself, because I was never getting cast in anything. But sometimes it can be worse, though. Once I was auditioning for a Jim Brooks movie with Reese Witherspoon, who was the star of the movie, and he essentially made poor Reese Witherspoon come all day and film scenes with me, only to call me a few weeks later and tell me that it quote, was not even close. And so that was honestly way worse than just reading with a casting director, because like a poor movie star had to come in and watch me fail for 5 hours. So yeah, I mean, the truth is there's just no good version of it, I think, ultimately. Yeah, it's a bad process.
That's great. Did anybody else have a worst audition horror story like that?
Reese Witherspoon does.
They're all the worst. I had Ben Schwartz and I one time, was a wonderful, funny actor. They were like pairing us up for this movie, you know, and we were at the Fox lot, and the director was there, and ultimately neither of us got cast. They cast Damon Wayans Jr. and Jake Johnson, who are both funny and wonderful. But this character at the time that I was like reading for was like super geared up, had this like video game that he's pitching me. It was so stoked. Okay. And like I felt like this is getting nuts, you know, and the director was like, that's great, let's go again, but just like bigger and crazier. And I was like, I don't, oh man, I don't know, man. You know, thinking like, even if I get this movie, like I don't want to do this. Like, oh man, I need this, you know. And we did it again, and he goes like, let's go even crazier. And Ben, who's also trying to get this job, goes, I don't think it can go crazier. I like that's the max. I think like that's probably the max. Like it was so generous of him in his own essentially test to be like, you got to stop. Like this is out of hand. You know what I mean? Like
you're gonna kill this
like
man.
Yeah. And also like what bad directing to be like more crazier, you know, like how general that could get. Yeah, that's not advice. That's just
No, it is
weird story.
I think doing the videos is kind of the best way of, and I always lived on a farm, so I was kind of sending in like VHS tapes, and I could just send what I wanted, which I thought, I was like, I'm proud of this. I don't care if you show this at your parties and make fun of it. I think it kicks ass, you know. And I just, oh my God, I found a bin in the attic, and I had my friend go over it, and I don't even know what's on these things. And I found all these options, you guys. And the guy, my friend who did it, was like, I want to play it to you we're going to videotape, we're going to film you watching these auditions. And I'm just like, anyway, it's crazy. But you can also screw that up too. And I think Thin Red Line, I wanted so bad. And I think I made like, I was just shy of like making foxholes and but I was like hiding behind like a couch, you know, like trying like, so bad. And I was like one of the only guys not in that movie.
Exactly. Are you sure you're not in it?
Pretty sure. I'm pretty sure everybody else was. Yeah.
Yeah, this is all great. I think it's very true that auditioning is not indicative, and it is a little bit of a different skill from acting, but there's still plenty to get out of it. I should probably wrap, and going off of that, the early career advice, I think we should do a one sentence. What is the one sentence of early career advice, either that you would give to young or early career actors now, or that you wish that you had gotten?
Over prepare, show up early, and don't be a dick.
Brilliant.
That's really good.
Sound advice. I'd say that is 95% of acting from my.
I don't know if I could go beyond that. That pretty much nails it.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say if you've over-prepared, quote unquote, if you've really prepared, then you can drive with one finger on the steering wheel. You know what I mean? Like you're only destined to grip it if you're about to forget your shit. You know what I mean? Right. So it really gives you comfort. You know, anything for me is such a huge part of acting is just always just chilling the fuck out so I can do it.
So I ask a lot of questions if it seems palatable. I work with, sometimes I'll go to the writer or director and I'll be like, explain to me this scene like I'm the stupidest person in the world. Like literally just explain it to me fundamentally. How would you explain to a child what this scene is about? And it's very helpful sometimes because I find people get in their heads. You have these very, again, like abstract kind of 1,000-foot up, like intellectualized conversations of things. And sometimes I need someone to tell me like, oh, it's like about that he wants this thing and she doesn't want to give it to him. And that's truly all that this is trying to do in the movie, you know? And asking those questions, not being afraid to look silly or stupid or like you don't understand the thing and just putting yourself out there and being like, I want to make sure I actually get this. And I don't want to pretend I get it. I want to actually get it. I find that served me very well, especially recently, I think is maybe when I've had the confidence to go up to the directors and be like, I think I get it. I want to really make sure I get it. So like, let's just talk about it. And yeah, it's been very helpful, I think.
I mean, with, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
No, I was just going to say sometimes it's helpful to have different ideas about what a scene is about and to come in and offer them up and share those. Say, look, I've got maybe 3 different ideas about how this could go. I can show you all of them, or, you know, I'll start with the one that feels best for me. Also, along the lines with what everybody else is saying, is to know your words well enough so that you're not looking down, you know, at something, so that the camera can see your face and your eyes. And like Peter said, you can drive with one finger. You know, it's just, if you know what you're there to do, you're not thinking about the words, and that's 99% of it. Just being present and sharing what you have to offer and sharing your ideas and asking as many questions as you need to make yourself feel comfortable in the room, whatever that room happens to be, whether it's a theater space or if it's just a camera. You know, if you can make yourself feel comfortable there, then you're way ahead of the game. That would have been helpful for me early.
And Michael, I like what you said earlier about step by step. Break it down into one thing at a time.
Sure, that's something that another wonderful actor gave me, you know, as a bit of advice, Mark Rylance. He was just sort of like, it's like one, you know, it's one, you know, amazing journey, and just take it one step at a time. Give yourself one thing to do as you're coming in somewhere. Then whether or not you achieve that thing, it gives you a place to go. Do one thing as opposed to all the things that you think you could do. Simplify it. Yeah.
The great Bill Macy, I was doing a movie with him, and the director came up to us and he kept talking about the scene before and the scene after. And Bill, and I was young, and Bill just turned to him and said, no. He said, that's not my job. My job is to play this moment, Steve and I in this moment. That's your job. Mm-hmm. And I since that day, I was like, that's it. I'm just going to worry about today's performance, or this morning's performance. And if it works, if it fits in, great. And if it doesn't, my bad.
Should have kept someone else.
Like, I don't need to be reminded. There are Germans everywhere. Yeah, I got it.
Although if someone had, maybe you'd be in the thin red line. Oh no, they were Japanese.
Wonderful. Wow, you guys, we've really covered a lot. Are there any final words of wisdom? Any stone left unturned here?
Can I just, I would, the thing that I wish that I'd known or someone said to me is just that when you're starting out, or when it feels like you're starting out, or when you're just, you know, being an actor and going through it, that the fear that you feel, or that particularly when you're starting out, feels sometimes insurmountable. It's not. And you get through it, and it might take a while, but there is a way through it. And I think, all of these things that we're talking about, from my experience, are the way you get through it. Simplifying, as Michael said, and finding these anchor points, like, over preparing, so you have all the stuff there, so you're not, it kind of reduces your fear. Like listening to the other actor, finding these like anchor points that anchor you, when you're feeling kind of fear or nervousness or whatever it is. That was my biggest barrier when I was a younger actor, just sort of pushing through that and allowing myself to trust myself. And there are so many great tools that you can use to anchor yourself, and preparation, listening, all those things, whatever it is, but knowing that you'll get through it. Like it's a process that sometimes is longer for others, for some than others.
I admire each of these guys so much, and it's feels a little nuts to be like a part of this panel, because as each of you are speaking, I feel much more like listening, being like, oh man, that's fucking good. I'm gonna walk away with that. Like it feels like such a charlatan to be like, what I'd like to offer up is but so I guess that's not advice. That's just a thanks. That's just, I'm like thrilled to be here. And I heard third hand this story basically that like from like Patrick Wilson had saw Tom Hanks on the street, like right out of theater school, and was like, please give me a piece of advice, and Hanks was like, good things come to those who persevere. And he like held on to that just as an actor, like not like how to be an actor, but just like how to remain in this business and not like give up when it's hard and when it sucks and when you're not getting the work or the the money that you need or want or any of this, and then years later have booked this show working with Rita Wilson and told her that story. And then like on opening night, there was like flowers for Patrick that was like, to one who persevered. And when I was 22 coming out of drama school, like I just like took that story and was like, just like held on to that in all these moments where I was like, I need money and work and it's not coming together, like I'm not, this isn't going the way I thought it would go, or like getting a gig and thinking, living so far in the future to be like, this will set me up for, and then like getting replaced or fired or it gets canceled, or any number of things that happen when you think you've got it made in the shade, and then it kind of turns on you. And I just felt like I feel a little weird giving advice, because I also feel like I've, and maybe all of us, but have like some amount of it just being in the right place at the right time in so many ways, and like doing everything I could on my end, but then also being like blessed to have been in the right headspace, in the right room, in the right time for the right people to get a job that then led me to something else that then eventually like added up to a career. And to for the maybe the first time in the last couple of years been like, I'm going to be okay in this business. Like I think I can sustain this, where for a decade in, I was like, I might not be able to do this forever. Like, I just don't know. And that maybe, I hope there's advice in there, but mostly I'm just like kind of overwhelmed and thrilled to be here today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Michael, did you have one last words of wisdom?
One other thing that came to my mind was asking for what you need, if you know what that is, to be able to not be afraid to, if you think you need something, to just voice it, be brave enough to just put it out there, and you'll be surprised at what may come back. That's all. I'm also grateful to be a part of this group, and I'm remembering Will Poulter as well, who I guess is who couldn't be here, and what a wonderful spirit and soul he is, and how amazing his work and our show was, and just wanted to throw that in there, remembering him. But it's been great. I'd love to hear all of your stories. And could listen to them all day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. And this has been very inspiring and very, I think, empowering. I think there's going to be a lot of actors that get, a lot of working actors that get a lot out of this. So thank you. On behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, process, and craft with our audience. Best of luck to all of you at the Emmys. Goodbye.